Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
It is 3 minutes after 10. It is the day upon which Jeremy Corbyn, well, what's quite the phrase to use here, do you think? Pushes himself forward a little more, becomes front and centre. Still no sign of him popping into this studio, but even I'm not conceited enough to suggest that that should be a significant part of your judgment of him. But in terms of interesting ideas around which he will hope voters come to coalesce, a national wage cap, the idea that we should limit the amount an individual can earn, is a weird thing. I would have thought in theory, in principle, that I'd quite like this idea. It seems to me perfectly plausible that if you can have a national minimum wage, a level below which no one really should be expected to work, then a national maximum wage carries a degree of credibility, especially if you believe, as I do, that the distribution of wealth in this country at the moment is unfair. But I've got to be honest with you, there's a distinct whiff of bonkersness around the whole thing. Do you know, it's up to you whether or not you'll do this. It's 4 minutes after 10. I'd rather listen to you today. I'm actually genuinely uncertain on this issue. I think if I was going into politics, I would look for something similar, something that really suggests a desire to break the mould. That's probably, if 2016 has any silver linings, that's probably the silver lining that we can take away from it. The idea that things do not have to continue as they are, or do not have to continue as they always have. But the notion of a national maximum wage, a national wage cap, where would you put it? Because the fellow who runs WPP, Martin Sorrell, of course, he cleared £70 million last year with his bonuses kicking in. I think the fellow who came second out of all the other comparable executives was about 50 million quid below him. £50 million. So the numbers are actually absurd, aren't they? They're like telephone numbers. If I had to argue that the country needed significant change when it comes to the gap, use the 0.001%. Did you know that? Been reading up on it a bit. It's not the 1% or the 0.1%. It's the 0.001%. This tiny number of people, best described as those who are available to afford a yacht. That's a pretty good indicator of this class of people whose wealth is increasing exponentially every single minute of every single day. But I don't know that you can you clamp down on someone who's paying himself a wage out of a company he founded himself? Can you tell a woman who has spent her life building up a business that there is a limit on how much money she can pay herself when every single penny of income derived from that company is as a direct result of her endeavour? I honestly don't know. I honestly don't know. I prefer the multiple idea. If he's flogging that, and the details are still a little unclear, but if he's flogging the multiple idea, then I actually love it. I do think this might be the future. Either a universal income, everybody getting a chunk of change whether they go to work or not, or this idea of a multiple coming in. I bored you just before the weekend with that statistic of the boss at Barclays earning 100 times more than he did in 1979, whereas the average national wage has only gone up by a factor of 4. But I just want to know what you think, A, about the idea, and B, whether or not it in any way colours your opinion of Jeremy Corbyn. Because that's what he's up to now. This is Corbyn 2.0, make no mistake. In many ways, it's the last roll of the dice for the Labour leader. And regardless of what your personal politics are, we've said it a million times together, haven't we? A strong opposition is a crucial backdrop of a functional democracy. What is this idea, this notion of somehow saying there's a limit on how much you can earn? What does it say to you about policy plausibility and about Jeremy Corbyn's leadership credentials? It's 7 minutes after 10. I normally take you right up till 15:15 with my hard-fought, strongly argued positions. But on this, I'm quite embarrassed to tell you, I honestly don't know. I kind of want to like it. Let's have a little listen to what he actually had to say. That might help.
I think the salaries paid to some footballers are simply ridiculous. I think some of the salaries paid to very high-earning top executives of companies are utterly ridiculous. I mean, why would somebody need to earn more than £50 million a year?
I agree with that. Why would anybody need to earn more than £50 million a year? They actually do get, nearly used a slightly inappropriate word there, they get very competitive about the size of their yachts and things like that. And you know, there's a point at which a super yacht becomes super, I think 50 metres, but some of them go up to like nearly 200 metres. And you park your yacht next to another fella's yacht in the harbour at Hydra, and if his yacht is 4 foot longer than yours, it's a massive insult to your masculinity. It is usually men. A massive insult to your masculinity. So that's why you need to earn this sort of money. But footballers, I mean, if we don't pay our footballers the top whack wages, then they'll go and work in countries where they do get paid the top whack wages, won't they? I mean, that's not rocket science. We already see many of our finest players seduced by the attractions of Real Madrid and things like that. But I don't want to talk about football, and I don't want to talk about yachts. I actually want to talk about you. You have a, quote, mainstream politician standing up today and effectively saying that there should be a cap on earnings.
Hello there, good afternoon. The Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn has told Sky News he wants to see a national wage cap, calling some of the salaries paid to footballers and chief executives obscene. Speaking ahead of a speech on Brexit later, he told Sky News he wants to end inequality and injustice in society.
The issue is of low pay within our society. So we're looking at a higher minimum wage of £10 per hour. What we're also looking at is the inequality of the grotesque levels of difference between the average wages paid in our society and the sort of telephone number salaries that are paid at the top end of it. And we have growing levels of inequality on that. And indeed, in the first 3 days of this year, many top executives have already earned as much as the rest are going to earn in a whole year. Surely this has to be addressed.
What would be the cap then? Because you could argue that if you cut off all those top earners, all those fat cats, those top executives, they pay the top level of income tax. So you'll be missing quite a bit of money from them. How would you make that up?
Well, they would be obviously having slightly less of their enormous pay levels, which would then be available for investment and development of their companies or indeed our society as a whole.
But it would go back into the company. It wouldn't go to benefit the taxpayer.
Well, actually, an economic development does benefit the taxpayer because more people work and more people get jobs as a result of that and therefore pay taxes. And so we'd have an expanding economy. But other countries do look at it. It's something we're looking at the moment and learning from others. We have a growing gap between the very high levels of salary of a very small number of people.
Okay, how much is too much? How much is too much? For example, it's public knowledge that you're on around £138,000 a year. Would that be the cap?
I think it would be somewhat higher than that, but let's look at the difference levels between the
What about a million a year then?
No,
because, I mean, people will bring up the example of footballers, for example. There's a lot of EU implications there. But some footballers are on millions of pounds a year.
Well, I think the salaries paid to some footballers are simply ridiculous. I think some of the salaries paid to very high earning top executives of companies are utterly ridiculous. I mean, why would somebody need to earn more than £50 million a year?
So there should be a cap on footballers' salaries. I know you're an Arsenal fan, so Arsene Wenger might not like what you're about to say, but should there be a cap on
Arsene Wenger is
wages?
a man who is an accountant at heart, and I think he'd probably like it very much indeed. And he would probably like there to be a maximum wage cap on the whole of the Premiership. Indeed, I'm not sure if
£50 million your figure then? It's creeping up and up.
I'm not going to put a figure on it. What I'm going to say is that we are looking at this issue of the disparity of pay within big companies and organisations and do something to try and close that gap.
Let's go live to Westminster. Our senior political correspondent, Robert Nisbet, is there. Robert, there you are. Robert, welcome to you. His detractors, Jeremy Corbyn's detractors, say this plan, unworkable, incoherent. I suppose some of his advisors might say, well, it doesn't matter, it's still leading your bulletins at 1 o'clock.
And I think a lot of Jeremy Corbyn's admirers will have a huge amount of sympathy for this particular plan. I think this is red meat to many of his supporters. And I think those critics who are within his own party will be fuming even before that interview took place, because they will have known that Jeremy Corbyn is not particularly good when it comes to message discipline. And today was all about setting out Labour's store as regards Brexit and the Brexit negotiations. And clearing up this confused position that the party seems to have as to freedom of movement, with Jeremy Corbyn apparently supporting it on the one hand, but other senior members of the party saying, look, if the referendum taught us anything, it's that there is a great deal of concern, including in marginal seats and Labour heartlands, Labour strongholds even, that migration has made life difficult for some of our supporters, and therefore they wanted some kind of clarity, but instead Jeremy Corbyn, being Jeremy Corbyn, has answered all of the questions that we put to him. So I think he succeeded in doing two things to his main supporters: speaking his mind, being honest, being a political conviction MP, but also tackling obscene rates of pay, which I think many of his supporters, many of his voters will have some sympathy with.
Robert, thanks very much indeed.
What do you think of that idea? 9 minutes after 10 is the time. Just straight up. I don't know that I've got the economic nous to tell you whether or not it's plausible or not, whether or not it would work. But I do have the kind of moral nous to tell you that we are living in a world where things are getting increasingly feudal. Things are getting increasingly medieval in the way that with most of us. And I think even people on relatively high salaries now fall into this category. Most of us are embarking every week, every year upon an exercise simply to keep the vessel afloat, while a tiny, tiny, tiny number of people are harvesting money from the rest of society on a level that we haven't seen for generations. Jeremy Corbyn seems poised to at least address that reality. Does the notion of a maximum wage appeal to you in any way? And if you're surprised to find it appealing to you, I'd love to talk to you. If you're surprised, I'm always more interested in people who are surprised by their reaction to a story, rather than, and I'm as guilty of this as you are, rather than sort of being able to predict in advance what your position is going to be on any given issue. I like entrepreneurship. I find the idea of saying that we should be looking after poor people being described as by taking some money away from rich people. You know that I find the description of that as the politics of envy utterly fatuous, utterly ridiculous. And then possibly this texter is onto something. Jezza is right, James, but it will be deemed mad. I kind of fell into that trap already myself when I said it's bold, it's perhaps brave, but is it actually bonkers? 0345 6060 973. Hit the numbers now, you will get through. 10 minutes after 10 is the time. You can email james at lbc.co.uk. You can text me on 84850, and you can tweet, in fact, at Mr. James OB. I mention that because this is a story that has literally broken in the last hour or so. So it's not something that's appeared in the newspapers. It's not something that's been cogitated over on the news programs, on the television. It's a gut shot, which is perhaps why I don't have a better thought out reaction to it myself yet. But what it does mean is that if you struggle to get through to the program ordinarily, or by the time we're sort of halfway through a topic, the phone lines are chock-a-blocker and it's a struggle to get on air, this is a great opportunity to get on it, as long as you've got something interesting to say, something surprising perhaps, or something from which the rest of us can learn. If a story's been around for 24 hours, all I do is run the flag up the pole, and then you start saluting. If a story's box fresh, like this one is, it sometimes, cross fingers, touch wood, lends itself to a slightly more nuanced analysis. I feel, personally, that I should like this idea, and I'm a little embarrassed to admit to you that I don't know if my reservations are born of the idea, the message, as it were, or of my continuing reservations about the messenger. So that's me. I'm out there. Let's talk about you now. Andy's in Cirencester. Andy, what do you reckon?
Well, I'm glad you said that. It's kind of the politics of ideas. I naturally like that direction. And then I sit down for 5 minutes and think, hang on a minute, how would you ever enforce it? And surely we would use our taxation system, which, has got many faults, but has proved over 100 years to kind of work. We don't seem to enforce it.
Yeah, the appetite doesn't seem to be there. So for clamping down on the sort of worst abuses, or even the sort of worst deployment of loopholes, why unworkable though? Why couldn't? I mean, so you'd be talking about a 100% tax level, wouldn't you? That's how you'd make it work.
I guess that was how it'd be, and then you would see all of the dodges that the human race is very good at innovating around rules. I think fundamentally it wouldn't work because it would potentially crush aspiration. And
Wait, now, hang on. That is the language of the of the politics of envy. Why would it crush aspiration to be told you can't earn more than 10 million quid? You're still going to aspire to earning 10.
You got me there, checkmate. I mean, that is good. When I look at the CEO, John Lewis, who takes about 400 grand, versus the CEO of some other PLC where it's 4 to 5 million in bonuses. If that's the kind of thing we're talking about, then, I'm starting to think that's actually quite interesting. Now, interesting and making it law, two different things, but if it is that ginormous stuff, and we're just trying to, take those people out of the conversation with something so-called progressive,
yes,
then I would probably buy into that. I don't want to talk about footballers at all, so let's leave those aside. They are an exceptional species, I suppose.
It's still a payroll, though, isn't it? I mean, it's still an issue that falls like. But you're right. If you're talking about immigration, everybody sort of gives footballers a free pass, so we should probably do the same with wage legislation.
So yeah, I mean, if no one should be able to earn more than £10 million. What would you do with £10 million anyway? Buy another yacht?
This is the mystery, because you're the one that just used the phrase it'd kill aspiration, and 10 minutes later you're wondering what the hell you're going to do with all that money anyway.
This is why politics is not simple, and it's no magic, bud, and it's actually complicated.
You're not wrong.
People like you know that, and you spend your 3 hours a day explaining to many of us that it's not simple.
Leave it out. You've been reading The Observer. You don't believe everything you read in The Observer, Andy.
How do you know that?
It's coming up to 10:15. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. It is incredibly complicated, and I don't mean this to sound patronising, and I know that Andy didn't either. The notion that selling the idea to the public that these things are really simple has assumed a momentum in 2016 that we never thought we'd see in our lifetime. The fact that you could say build the wall or take back our country and actually persuade significant swathes of the nation that this is an actual realistic policy ambition rather than a meaningless demagogish soundbite. That lesson has been learned. Jeremy Corbyn has to react to that reality. So while this may not be as shallow as a meaningless soundbite, what flesh can you see on the bones of this idea of a maximum wage? 0345 60973. Where would you put it? I mean, how many people listening to this programme earn more than £2 million a year? I'd go out on a limb and say there's probably one or two of you listening, but not many, generally speaking. Where would you... I mean, who needs more than £5 million a year? Why do you need to pay anyone £70 million a year? But if it's your business, even with my kind of lefty slippers on this morning, I can't help thinking that if it's your business, then the legislation should have more to do with how much you pay everybody else than it has to do with how much you pay yourself. 16 after 10 is the time. And you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where we're sort of trying to be a little bit... I don't know if measured is quite the right word to use. Possibly just a little bit more open-minded than we often are. Already some people are suggesting Jeremy Corbyn's promotion of a possible maximum wage, a wage cap, is communism. I'll examine that suggestion. It doesn't look like communism to me, because you'd have someone earning 12 grand and someone earning 2 million quid, which is kind of the opposite of complete redistribution of wealth. But anyway, look, the question's out there. This is what he's suggested. It looked a little off the cuff in the studio as he did it, but politicians like Jeremy Corbyn, or people actually like Jeremy Corbyn, people possessed of outlooks like Jeremy Corbyn, and I can see myself in this mould a little, quite like the broad brushstroke of an idea like this, the Robin Hood nature of it, take it from the rich and give it to the poor. But plausibility, as Andy in Cirencester observed so winningly in the first call this morning, it's a lot more complicated than ideas like this allow. Politics and even life. 21 minutes after 10. Amazing news of the day. And it's sad news. It's the first anniversary today of David Bowie's death. If you'd asked me, I've definitely got that right, haven't I? If you'd asked me when I thought he passed, I'd given you 4 or 5 months ago. I can't believe it's a year. It just seems bizarre that it's actually been a year. Anyway, back to Corbyn, back to the maximum wage, and back, most importantly, of course, to you. Danny's in Liverpool. Danny, what would you like to say?
Hi, James, you all right?
I'm grand, mate. What's on your mind?
To be honest, the idea of Corbyn's pronounce there is kind of sentimentally, it sounds good. It sounds appealing.
Sentimentally.
But it's also kind of classic Corbyn in the sense of, on paper, it just doesn't seem to add up, and it's just slightly misguided, and there's no flesh about the bones. So what I mean by that is, there's a couple of studies, if we relate the question to healthcare and health inequality, which, there's numerous texts, the main one being The Spirit Level by Wilkinson and Pickett, and they're the work of Danny Dalton, which I'm sure quite a few people will be aware of.
A lot won't, so give me the Danny in Liverpool version.
Yeah, well, I'll run to that version. It'll be better, but just so people can go and look up after. But yeah, basically, in The Spirit Level, they measured health inequality based on different incomes. So obviously, different tax brand and gradient you're in, position you're in, you're going to be better off. So someone on a low-paid job, lowest tax grade, can expect to live 72 years. The very richest can expect to live for 80 years. They'll die of the same issues and problems. It's nothing to do with their lifestyle. It just seems to be about this.
It's one of my favourite. It's one of my favourite phone-in subjects. Actually, we haven't done it for a while because someone measured that on. I think it's the Jubilee line going east out of the city here in London. The life expectancy diminishes at every stop on the train line for the reasons that you describe, and it is. You probably stress, isn't it? Really, at the bottom line, the more because everyone thinks that they worry about money, but you really worry about money if you're worried about actually turning on the heating or putting food on the table.
Well, this is the point they're making. It's what they call a relation of status anxiety. So when you look at health inequality, it's not between the very top and the very bottom. It's linear through the whole strata of society. So someone who lives in a flat is more insecure. Someone who owns a home and a car will feel better health and have better health outcomes than someone who. Well,
all of which should make you at least cautiously welcoming of a maximum wage idea. I mean, I tell you, I just remind you of his words. I would like there to be some kind of high earnings cap. Quite honestly, he said. Now, I grant you, it's not exactly Thomas Piketty in the level of its detail, but it's a bold, aim, isn't it? So it's an aim you can share.
I can share all of Jeremy's ideas, but in reality, he never actually says how they're going to be, and they're misguided, and he presents them so awful. So my point is, if you can pay someone if £400,000, if that's the cap of his John Lewis CEO, that makes no difference to someone who's still on 12 grand. They're still going to be in the same position. So to say, right, we're going to cap, rather than say we're going to tax, we're going to increase your tax, and we're going to redistribute the money that way.
I think the speech will do that. I think the speech is going to look at a 100% tax rate. And it's not unprecedented, is it? I mean, under Harold Wilson, when Healey was Chancellor, I think it went up into the 90s, didn't it? The top tax rate is when John Lennon started singing about the tax man.
Yeah. Well, this is the point we have, Corbyn, because we expect the speech to come and for it to make sense, and then it just completely doesn't. So there's a few things in here that are typical of him. It's great sentiment, can work, seems like a good idea, presented poorly. We wait for the next big hit.
Oh, ye of little faith. 3:30 today. It is I don't know where this tweet has come from, whether it's come because the feed is coming straight into the studio, not my personal account. So and I've lost the thing, but just saying, wait until 3:30. Don't believe the spin being put on it by the Murdoch press. Just think of a number, Danny, just to sort of channel Johnny Ball for a moment. What would you say you might be able to sell to the British public as the point at which you should start paying 100% tax on your income, or the level that no one should be able to earn above?
I don't know.
Come on, mate.
Want to say,
no, you got to. You can't go. I'll keep you on here. You can't hang up. I'll be here every time you pick the phone up. I'm not going to hang up at this end. I'll be like one of those cold callers or one of those fraudsters. You'll pick the phone up in 6 hours' time to order a pizza, and I'll still be here going, think of a number, Danny. Give me a number.
I'd still be listed.
Bless you.
If there's a CEO in John Lewis, you take 400 grand. I like their employment scheme. I like how they treat their workers. So if 400 grand works for a CEO of that size and a company that's doing that well, then why can't it be?
Seems the same. Any glorious property that you'd like to live in would be within your reach. I'll meet you. I'll say 500,000 for the sake of argument. Jeremy Corbyn says 138,000, but there are footballers who earn in a week there's footballers who earn not far shy of 400 grand a week. In fact, some of these contracts over in China, which will change the pay structure back here, would dwarf that. There you go, Danny and Andy, the first two callers today, both sentimentally drawn to the idea, but worried that it's actually a little bit pie in the sky. And I wonder sometimes, not to overcomplicate matters, I wonder sometimes whether our notion of what's pie in the sky is actually a little bit manipulated by what we're told is possible and what we're told isn't possible. I know that some Scandinavian countries have really powerful multipliers in place. So if the lowest paid person in the company earns X, then the highest paid is not allowed to earn more than X times 50 or X times 25. Murdoch is relevant to this conversation, just to go back to that text, because that is where the conversation is led from. That's where the idea comes from, that it is anti-aspiration, or you should never put any limits whatsoever upon what robber barons can trouser, because if you do, then somehow you'll impoverish yourself in a potential future. Yeah. Victor is in Orpington. Victor, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James.
Hey, Victor.
I'm half Russian or half Ukrainian. My mum was born in the Soviet Union. My wife was born in the Soviet Union, and we were all talking about this. Just about half an hour ago.
Yeah.
It just reminds them of communism. I know it's hard to say that it's not, but it reminds them of that. That what you're trying to do is you're trying to get everyone onto the same level, so that then.
But you're not, are you?
Is that there is no poverty, and then there is no then affluence, as it were.
No, it's simply, I mean, with the greatest of respect to your mum and to your wife, they're just wrong. The idea that you could earn 25 grand a year and it would be impossible to earn more than 2.5 million has absolutely nothing to do with trying to bring everybody down to the same level, does it?
No, but that's exactly kind of the way it was in Ukraine, is that nobody had a better car than anybody else.
But that's not what we're talking about, Victor. There's no, I mean, if you earn 2.5 million quid a year and you're not allowed to earn more than that, and I earn 25 grand a year and I'm not allowed to earn less than that, you're not allowed to pay me less than that. What logic is it that leads you to the conclusion that we'd have no choice but to drive the same car?
No, but it just reminds them of that. But here's the other thing.
But they're wrong.
But we've been brought up in this country, in a country that's had, in my opinion, a wonderful education system, a free education system for every child. We've all been brought up that if you want to achieve something, you can go out and get whatever you want, but it's limitless to get what you want.
I think we're going to disagree with each other about everything today.
Yeah, I mean, that's the beauty of it.
There's 16 million people in this country can't get 100 quid by tea time today, and you think that they've been brought up to believe that everything's within their reach.
But again, it's sentimentally, he's right. Again, I'll agree with the previous two guys that sentimentally he's right. But what you're then doing is, I think there's always this danger that you're going to alienate people even further.
Yeah, I think, well, there's truth in that. But as I would suggest in the case of your family members that you've just cited, if they're being alienated by this suggestion, it's because they completely misunderstood it. But again, that's his job. It's his job to get the message out there. Victor, thank you. 10:30 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. A broadish consensus so far, but I would like to invite you to explode it in whatever way you see fit. 0345 6060973 is the number you need. Sentimentally, the suggestion of Jeremy Corbyn that we should put a limit somewhere in the upper echelons of earnings. He's on about 140 grand a year himself, and he said earlier today it would definitely be higher than that. But some footballers, of course, earn that in a week. Well, I don't know if it's helpful to ask where you would put it. I'm more interested in whether or not you think it would work, or whether or not you would change your vote accordingly, whether this is the sort of thing that might draw you into the Labour fold. 0345 6060973 is the number you need. 10:35 is the time. Later in the programme, I want to look at the NHS and at the rail strike. They're curiously qualified to talk about that NHS business today, because I'm suffering terribly at the moment from a dose of conjunctivitis. And you may remember, if you're kind enough to have listened to this programme, what do I mean kind? If you're wise enough to have listened to this programme for a number of years, I gave myself a bit of a kicking on air a few years ago when my eldest was very young and she had conjunctivitis, and I didn't know what it was. She had a glued up eye, which is quite scary when you're a relatively new dad, especially when you're in one of those rare occasions where you're in sole charge of a relatively new baby. And I went around all the local GPs, the ones we were registered at, and then all the others as well, and no one could look at her. So I took her to A&E at Hammersmith, and you gave me the telling us off I got from nurses and doctors for doing that, and of course from civilians as well. But now I've got a dose of conjunctivitis. I've never had it before, and it hasn't responded to the over-the-counter medicine. So I went to the GPs yesterday to see if I could make an appointment, and they were chocker. And she said to me, she said, good job you're not at the health centre over the way. They've got a 3-week wait. We've got a 3-day one, but we won't be able to see you in the afternoon. Anyway, I won't bore you with the details. I left them my number. I said, look, if anyone doesn't turn up or cancels later today, can you give me a ring? And they did. Another reason why I love the NHS. But if someone, I mean, almost like, if you've ever had it, you'll know, you almost want to take a fork to your own eyeball. The idea of having to wait 3 weeks to see someone, I would go to A&E. We might try and look at this crisis facing the NHS, a sort of crisis we haven't seen since the mid-90s. What have the mid-90s got in common with 2017? Oh, yeah, Conservative government. But we haven't seen crises like this since the mid-90s, and I just sort of wonder where you think responsibility lies. Jeremy Hunt's saying it's our fault for going to A&E, but if you just told me I've got to wait 3 weeks to have a torturous eyeball examined, I think I'd probably have bowled along to A&E myself at some point. 10:37 is the time. Don't respond to the specific detail of my own ocular complaint, all right? I want to talk later about the situation at the NHS in general, not about my own issues. Eric's in New Malden to take us back to the maximum wage. Eric, what would you like to say?
Maybe I woke up on the stupid side of the bed.
Unlikely, Eric.
I don't understand this at all. I don't understand how this helps anyone. I mean, this is why people are going against the usual politicians, because he thinks that hurting a big guy is going to help the little guy. This is robbing from the rich and giving to absolutely no one.
But it worked for Trump.
Well, no. Trump,
what you've just described, the selling the idea, in his case, of course, fraudulently, that we're going to hit the big guy and give it back to the little guy. I mean, he's pulled that off.
Yeah, but there's quite a bit of we're going to save jobs in there. I don't think a Trump discussion is necessarily going to get us.
But the idea of just fatuously saying we're going to take money off people who've got too much and give it to those who haven't got enough, it does work politically. So I don't think you're stupid if you don't see that.
No. But he's not taking money off the rich and giving it to the poor. He's just taking money off the rich.
Looks that way to you. The 100% tax rate wouldn't actually deliver any money.
Nobody's going to give 100% tax rate. Nobody's going to pay anyone above who's going to pay an employee at any level more money if all of it is going to get taxed. If you get offered a pay rise tomorrow,
and all of it goes to the Treasury,
but all of it's going to go to the Treasury.
It's quite surreal.
That's not gonna work. No company will do it. They'll put the money back into profit so their shareholders are happy. Nobody's going to pay somebody nothing. It doesn't make any sense to me at all.
Although the 96% tax rate did, I mean, although it was sort of desperately controversial, it did. People did still pay it.
Fine. If you want to enforce tax law, I think government has absolutely the right to govern taxes and enforce tax law. That's fine. But to actually say you can't make any more money than X amount doesn't help anyone. It doesn't help that guy at 25 grand.
Can you envision a system? I mean, remember, this is kind of off the cuff for Corbyn, so perhaps if he develops the theme a little, and he will no doubt explain it in a little more detail come 3:30 this afternoon, can you see a way in which it would actually carry a little more weight? Because you would see evidence of the money being taken from one depository and put in another one, taken from the rich and given to the less rich.
I'd much rather that they came up with a way of taking the current tax laws and enforcing them properly. I mean, he's going to help a lot more.
They can do that as well.
Well, then can we do the stuff that you're supposed to do that's on the job description first, and then go off on your special project?
I think, crikey, if I'm in a position of having to defend his position, God knows where we're all going to end up. But I think he's been pretty robust on strengthening tax avoidance.
Then that's fine. Then if that's the case, and everything is being collected that should be collected, and you still don't have enough, then you have to up the taxes in certain ways. But you can't. I still don't get the idea of paying somebody a massive
I don't know if I do either, and I think that's why people who are more drawn to it than you are describe it as being sentimentally appealing, but perhaps intellectually implausible. What about a multiple? Does that fall at the same hurdles? If I think Tony Benn used to argue that the highest paid member of a company should never earn more than 20 times what the lowest paid person was coming. You can fix that multiple wherever you want it. Would that be any more attractive?
I mean, if it's a company that's at least partly governmentally owned, then I think you can enforce that sort of thing.
I think you're right. I think you're on it, Eric. I think you've nailed it. I think you've shot his fox. It just doesn't feel like it could ever work or deliver any of the things that we sentimentally hope it might.
So not the stupid side of the bed.
Not the stupid side of the bed at all. Possibly the. I don't know. You didn't wake up on the idealistic side of the bed either, but then I've just realised we're now mooting the possibility that your bed's got more sides than a Rubik's Cube. That's some bed you got there, Eric. It's 10:41 0345 60609 73. It's worrying that even people who like it think it's a bit silly, and then people, of course, who don't like it, well, they're unlikely to change their political intentions accordingly. Linda is in Armston, in Manchester. Linda, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi, James. First time caller, a bit nervous.
You're very welcome. Don't be.
Thank you. I just think it's an absolutely bonkers idea, and I believe what Farage and UKIP have done to Britain with Brexit.
He who must not be named. He who must not be named from now on, please, Linda.
Yeah, definitely. Well, you know, Corbyn's going to finish off with this stupid idea. I mean, if it's public salaries, then fair enough, because obviously it comes from the taxpayer.
But even then, you know,
companies, it's just, I mean, I would rather have a minimum salary rather than a minimum wage. I would rather have a minimum salary of, say, £21,000 a year.
Rather than an hourly minimum wage. Well, you can't quite do that, can you? Because of part-time and full-time.
No, but the thing is, I just do not think it, I mean, I know Corbyn's, you know, pining for Castro and things, and he wants to kind of maybe bring the Cuba into this country. But socialism, unfortunately, as idealistically, you know, paradisical as it sounds, it just does not work. I mean, look at Venezuela, look at Cuba. It's just crazy.
Well, hang on, though. I don't want to hit you over the head with the same statistic. Hang on, Linda. I think you got your phone upside down. Only the mouthpiece is working. Can you hear me?
Sorry, yeah, I mean, I think it's a bit, you know...
When I say can you hear me, it's a precursor to me talking, not you talking.
Sorry.
That's quite all right. I'm interrupting you while you're interrupting me, while you're interrupting you while I'm interrupting me. It's great. But here's the thing, and I'm sorry to be boring, but in 1979, head of Barclays earned about 1/100th of what he earns now. The average worker in this country earned roughly a quarter of what they earn now. So something has gone out of control, and this would be a way of bringing it back into control. Now, we didn't live in Cuba in 1979, did we? We lived in Britain. So are you sure it's as bad as you think?
I think that is when, was it Thatcher deregulated the banks and then Blair carried it on. I just think...
So it would just be an attempt to sort of draw back a bit from that bandwagon?
I'm sorry. I think half the City of London's going to go anyway, unfortunately, which is where our wealth comes from. And it's because the government didn't pass it down that they allowed Brexit to get away with everything, you know. I just think that what Farage has done...
That he who must not be named.
Well, yeah, sorry. Corbyn will finish off with this bonkers. I mean, for public sector salaries, yeah, I'm totally in agreement with, but you cannot...
This seems strange. I mean, a lot of people are ringing in to say how dispiriting they find it to hear people ringing in to argue against their own interests. But then you think back to Eric, and you'd need a lot more evidence that the money you're taking away from Peter would actually make its way to Paul. That was a sparkling debut, Linda. Thank you so much. I look forward to speaking to you again. It's coming out to 11:15. John Maloney, one of the sharpest comics on the circuits, just tweeted to tell me that he's just fallen out of the idealistic side of his bed. One of the great advantages, of course, of being a stand-up comedian is you work late and you lie in late as well. It's 10:45. It's fair to say that at the first glance, Jeremy Corbyn's proposal that we have a national wage cap, a limit on the amount that an individual can earn, well, we need to find out a little bit more about it. The good news is that we may come 3:30 today, but at first glance, it hasn't proved very popular with you, although Sam is very cross with me as a member of the 1% for apparently arguing against wealth redistribution. Sam, mate, you've got to take the wax out of your ears. I'm passionately in favour of wealth redistribution. I'm even more in favour of plans that seem plausible as opposed to plans that don't. And to use football as an example, with the greatest respect to Mr. Corbyn, who's not here to explain himself, but maybe will be one day. If you're going to use footballers as an example, people are going to respond to that. And that seems to me to be the worst possible example he could have picked. On the other hand, do I think anyone should be earning £20 million? Well, no, I don't. I think it's absurd and actually pretty disgusting and, to use a very unfashionable phrase, profoundly unchristian. But the shareholders have decided to pay the fella that, and the customers are paying the money that frees up the cash for the shareholders to decide to pay the fella that, and the shareholders are paying the fella or the woman that because they think they're worth it or they think they have to keep him or her at the helm. I don't know quite where the cap kicks in. I'd love to be educated, illuminated, enlightened, but right now, I'd go with the sentimentally attractive, intellectually implausible conclusion. Max is in Reading. Max, what do you think?
Just to start, I don't think Jeremy Corbyn will ever come on your show because I think he values his dignity, because I think you'd tear to shreds.
No, I wouldn't. Why does everybody say that? I'd be very, very respectful, and I'd ask him some leading questions, and I'm pretty sure he wouldn't end up having his PR dragging him out before the humiliation gets even more profound. It could not go as badly as the last time the leader of a political party sat in a studio with me. We can say that for certain. But anyway, that's a conversation for a different day. Back to the tax. Back to the wage cap.
So actually, I'm against the maximum wage. I don't think you should cap someone's wage. I think the thoughts and the policy should be put in place for managing corporate taxing properly, and also there's an idea thrown out that what they should is actually reduce corporate tax slightly, but have a guarantee that they'll reinvest that reduction into the UK, into their business, so they expand the business and possibly hire more people for their jobs. So they're actually expanding their business and making more money, and there's more job creation.
But that's an even more interventionist, sort of non-free market policy, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. But what I don't agree with is, and again, it depends how you sit there. If I'm an entrepreneur and I create a company and I make £100 million, I pay my corporate taxes to the penny, and I want to be paid out of my money an X amount, like 20 million, like you said just there. That's my money. I can do what I want with it. I think if a government caps that or stops you doing that, I'd be like, well, do you know what? Actually, I'll go set up somewhere else where they're not going to do that.
I mean, that does even, even my sort of twisted lefty logic can just see that as being irresistible, your argument. If it's my business and I have set it up, and at the end of the year there's, I don't know, £1 billion loitering in the coffers after everyone's been paid and the electricity bill's been signed off and everybody's got a nice little bonus, what am I going to do with it? What's the point of earning it? That's the problem, isn't it? It doesn't make you greedy or Gordon Gekko or some sort of desperate capitalist monster.
No, I think Britain has thrived off the fact that we have so many people that have wealth. So, for example, in 2010, we had just over 500,000 millionaires in the UK. And then as of 2015, we had 715,000, that's according to The Guardian. So we've increased that amount by 200,000. Now, how can wealth in a country be bad? What we don't want to do is strip the wealth away, because they will go elsewhere. If you're a clever business person, why would you sit somewhere?
Up to a point. Some would, some wouldn't. I always get, the old Paul Daniels, the late Paul Daniels, insisting he was going to leave the country in the event of a Labour government being elected. And even if Labour had brought in punitive tax rates, there's an awful lot to think about before you actually decide to disrupt and uproot, isn't there? But some would. We shall see. Yeah, Max, so no one likes it so far. Maybe he's got something. Is there anything up his sleeve? If he pulls out his Rubik's Cube at 3:30 later today and works his magic, he could present a picture that is absolutely beautiful. Hunter is in Cannes in France. Hunter, what do you think?
I love it. Capital idea.
Here we go. Well done.
Really don't.
Oh. Everyone's a joker. Why?
Right. No. So I really didn't have much to say on the subject other than what you touched on at the beginning intro. Last week you were talking about the Barclays, the banks, the pay disparity of the last however many years.
Yeah, and I think it's rank and wrong, but I don't know that this is going to fix it.
Sure. No. Well, so rather than a pay cap, maybe as a suggestion or as an idea, just something to think about potentially. As the wages increase at the top end, maybe a percentage or a ratio to have them increase at the bottom end as well.
Yeah, well, one presumes that is going to go hand in hand. He's not just going to announce later today that we're going to really spank the rich, and I don't know what we're going to do with all the money that we raise, but we're definitely going to spank the rich. And he's definitely not going to say that, is he? It's going to be a proposal involving redistribution. Why? I mean, I can. It's funny, last week you mentioned the show, so I'll refer back to it, I hope, without being too sort of up myself. It was another one of those clips that went absolutely bonkers, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of things. So why don't we get angrier about this? Why don't we actually get angrier about that single figure, that 100 multiplier for the head of a bank and the 4 multiplier for the rest of us? You could get angry without thinking this is the answer, can't you?
Yeah, well... Yeah.
What are you doing? Is that a missile thrush in the background?
Oh, sorry, no, I'm trying to detach a piece of metal from another piece of metal.
What, why?
It's my job.
What are you doing?
I'm just literally just now. I'm trying to take a grate off a ventilator.
So that was your wrench making that noise?
Yeah.
I mean, they say men can't multitask, Hunter, but I'm a little offended that I don't have your undivided attention. I'm competing with a grate.
Sorry, no, you're absolutely not. Don't worry.
No, I absolutely am. You've got me in one ear. You've got the grate at the end of your hands.
Back on subject.
Yes.
I felt like potentially it was sort of like a last maybe grasp at sort of like an attempt for appeal to an audience. I feel like he'd not necessarily, got on board. It feels like a wayward. I mean, all of these statements are just statements. It's not ever if he was going to.
But do you know what it is? Actually, I tell you what it is. Whether it's plausible or deliverable or not, it has to be envisionable. If anybody even begins to understand what I mean by that, you have to. So I can actually picture. It's not. That's the point. So I can picture a wall, bizarrely, on the border between America and Mexico. I know what that would look like. So it might be completely bogus.
People could.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, though, isn't it? It's completely bogus and bonkers. But I can close my eyes and see it. I can't yet close my eyes and see how this would work. Good luck with the grate. I'm a little worried about you operating heavy machinery while you're on the radio. It should probably be a health warning against it. Owen is in High Wycombe. We haven't had enough female voices this hour, he says, sounding a little bit creepy. Owen, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Just want to say the first time caller, so just waiting for the right time really to call.
Oh, great stuff. Stuff. A lot of people are. A lot of people do. So you've given them a masterclass in how to pick your moment. What do you want to say?
Yes. So, well, I'm in favour of it massively. I just think, I don't know why many people are trying to shoot it down, really. I don't know how you'd go about enforcing it, but the idea is good.
Well, that might be why many people are trying to shoot it down, Owen, because it might be initially attractive, but if you can't close your eyes and see it, how are you going to deliver it?
Well, yeah, I understand that, but I think, I guess it's like someone said before, I guess it's the sentiment to it really is good.
Maybe that this could be the Corbyn 2.0, is that he's actually going to see whether or not he can pull off the trick of delivering essentially hollow but outwardly very attractive promises, and his mouth will write a cheque that his premiership could never cash, but by the time he gets elected, in his eyes, then we might have forgotten all these promises.
Yeah, maybe.
But you were going to vote for Jeremy Corbyn before he made this announcement, weren't you?
Yes, absolutely.
That's the problem, you see, right there. In that it has to be, these announcements have to be designed to just prick the interest, let alone draw the vote of people who right now wouldn't contemplate voting for Jeremy Corbyn in a million years. He needs to pull something out of the bag that makes you go, maybe I've completely misjudged this guy. And I worry, as Arthur puts it even more harshly than I have, Corbyn seems to be uniting the country against this absurd policy. Owen, notwithstanding. Lovely debut, Owen. I look forward to talking to you again. This is LBC. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. It's slightly sort of mesmeric, isn't it? Well, just to glance briefly in the rearview mirror to the last hour. I think actually when you see Corbyn out there doing his thing, you begin to understand the cultish appeal. He's so different from the shiny-faced, plausible, very affluent sort of politicians that we're used to now, isn't he? He really is. But and I can see how people might construe that as a strength, because it's just a change is as good as a rest. But whether or not he can essay a move up to the next level of credibility, we will begin to find out later today.